The silence of the Montana night was shattered by the sound of raucous laughter and piano music spilling from the Golden Stag Saloon, the revelry a stark contrast to Hannah Evans, as she stumbled into the cold October air of 1878, tears streaming down her face, her worn blue dress torn at the shoulder. The town of Silver Creek had gathered to celebrate the autumn harvest, a rare occasion for merriment in the harsh frontier. Hannah had been serving at the feast, a position she'd been grateful for after losing her position as a schoolteacher when the small mining operation that sustained the town had begun to falter. The mining company's manager, Theodore Gaines, had made advances toward her throughout the evening. When she refused his final proposition, delivered in whispers against her ear as she cleared his plate, his reaction had been swift and cruel. "This ungrateful harlot," he'd announced to the crowd, his voice carrying over the music, "has been stealing from our tables." He produced a silver spoon from his pocket, one Hannah had never seen before. "Found this in her apron. Can't have thieves serving good folk, can we?" No amount of pleading could overcome the word of the most powerful man in town. The tavern owner had roughly escorted her outside, tossing her final week's wages into the dirt at her feet. "You're done here," he'd said, "and you'd best be done in Silver Creek by morning." Now Hannah stood alone in the street, the revelry continuing without pause behind her, as if she'd never existed at all. The cold mountain air bit through her thin dress, and she hugged herself against the chill. Her small room above the mercantile was paid through the week, but after that, she had nowhere to go. No family, no prospects, and now no reputation. She bent to gather the scattered coins, dignity forgotten in the face of necessity when a shadow fell across her. Hannah flinched, fearing Gaines had followed to further torment her. "Madam," a deep voice said instead, "you dropped these." Hannah looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the glow of the saloon. As he stepped forward, the lamplight revealed a man in his early 30s, with weathered features and kind eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. Dust covered his clothing, suggesting he'd recently arrived in town. "Thank you," Hannah whispered, accepting the coins he'd gathered for her. Their fingers brushed, and she noticed calluses that spoke of hard work. "Name's Wade Cooper," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Couldn't help but overhear what happened in there." His voice carried no judgment, only a gentle concern that made her tears threaten to return. "Hannah Evans," she replied automatically, years of proper upbringing asserting themselves even in her distress. "And you shouldn't concern yourself. It's not your trouble." Wade studied her for a moment, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. "I've got more food than I need," he said, unwrapping a loaf of bread and breaking it in half. "And a man riding alone appreciates company for supper, if you're willing." Hannah hesitated, pride warring with hunger and the cold reality of her situation. "Why would you help a stranger accused of theft?" A smile touched Wade's lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Because I saw what really happened. That fella slipped that spoon into your pocket when you refused whatever he was whispering. I've been watching from the corner since I came in for a meal." He offered the bread again. "I'm a fair judge of character, Miss Evans, and you don't strike me as a thief." The simple kindness nearly undid her. Hannah accepted the bread, trying to maintain her composure. "Thank you, Mr. Cooper." "Just Wade, please." He gestured toward a small campfire flickering at the edge of town. "I've got coffee brewing if you'd like to warm yourself before heading back to your lodgings." Hannah glanced toward the mercantile, then back at the kind stranger. The town that had been her home for nearly a year had cast her aside without a second thought. What did she have to lose? "I would appreciate that," she said finally. They walked in silence to his small camp, where a coffee pot sat nestled in the coals of a modest fire. A dappled gray horse stood nearby, contentedly munching on oats from a feed bag. Wade busied himself with pouring coffee into 2 tin cups while Hannah settled on a fallen log he'd positioned as a seat. "Passing through?" she asked, grateful for the warmth of the fire against the autumn chill. Heading south for winter, Wade confirmed, handing her a steaming cup. Got some cattle to deliver to a ranch outside of Cheyenne, then thought I might continue on to Texas where the winters are milder. Hannah sipped the strong, bitter coffee, feeling it warm her from within. You're a cattle driver? Wade settled across from her, the fire illuminating his features. Among other things, spent time as a ranch hand, did some scouting for the cavalry years back. His eyes reflected the dancing flames. Lately, I've been taking odd jobs going where the work is. What about you, Miss Evans? You don't seem like someone who's lived in mining towns her whole life. Hannah stared into her coffee cup. I came west to teach. My parents passed within months of each other back in Ohio, and there wasn't much left for me there. She didn't mention the broken engagement that had followed, another loss in a year of losses. Silver Creek needed a teacher, but when the mine started failing, they couldn't afford one anymore. Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. Tough country for a woman alone. I manage, Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. Or I did until tonight. Wade broke off another piece of bread and handed it to her. What will you do now? Hannah accepted the offering, considering her options. There's not much for me here anymore. I have a little saved. Perhaps enough for stage fare to Denver. Wade added a log to the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. Denver's a hard place without connections or a position waiting. Do you have a better suggestion, Mr. Cooper? There was a hint of challenge in her voice. Wade smiled at her spirit. As a matter of fact, I might. The ranch where I'm delivering cattle Circle M near Cheyenne, the owner mentioned they're looking for someone to teach his children. 3 of them, ages 6 to 12. His wife passed last winter. Hannah felt a flicker of hope. And you think he would consider me? Marcus is a good man. If I vouch for you, he'd give you a fair chance. Wade hesitated. It's a 4-day ride from here, though. The implication hung in the air between them. 4 days traveling alone with a man she'd just met would be scandalous, potentially ruinous to her reputation. But then, Hannah thought bitterly, her reputation in Silver Creek was already in tatters. I couldn't impose, she began. It's on my way, Wade said simply. And I'd welcome the company. Hannah studied him across the flames. There was something steady about Wade Cooper, a quiet strength that put her at ease despite the circumstances of their meeting. In his eyes, she saw no guile, only genuine concern. Why are you helping me? She asked softly. Wade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. 5 years ago, I was robbed and left for dead outside Laramie. A Shoshone family found me, tended my wounds, shared what little food they had, never asked for anything in return. He met her eyes again. Sometimes folks need a hand. Seems only right to offer one when I can. His simple philosophy touched something in Hannah. She thought of her dwindling funds, the hostile faces in the saloon, and the uncertain future that awaited her if she remained. If you're certain it's no trouble, she said carefully, I would be grateful for the escort to Cheyenne. Wade nodded as if the matter were settled. We'll leave at first light. Best get some rest while you can. It's a hard ride ahead. I need to gather my things, Hannah said, rising from the log, and settle my account at the mercantile. I'll walk you, Wade offered, standing as well. Town can be unpredictable after a night of drinking. As they made their way back toward the main street, the sounds of the continuing celebration growing louder, Hannah felt a curious mixture of apprehension and relief. She was leaving behind the life she'd carefully constructed over the past year, placing her trust in a stranger with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Mr. Cooper, she said as they approached the mercantile, I want to thank you, not just for the bread and coffee, but for seeing the truth when others didn't. Wade tipped his hat slightly. Get some rest, Miss Evans. Dawn comes early in these mountains. Hannah nodded and slipped inside, aware that her life had irrevocably changed course in the span of a single evening. As she climbed the narrow stairs to her small room, she wondered if she was being incredibly brave or foolish beyond measure. Perhaps, she mused as she began to pack her meager belongings, it was a bit of both. True to his word, Wade was waiting at the edge of town as the first pale light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Hannah approached with her carpet bag and a small trunk containing everything she owned in the world. "Morning," Wade greeted her, already atop his dappled gray stallion. A second horse, a chestnut mare with a white blaze down her nose, stood saddled beside him. Hannah hesitated, eyeing the mare with apprehension. "I'm afraid I've never ridden astride before." Wade dismounted smoothly. "Pennies gentle as they come, I'll help you up." After securing her trunk and carpet bag to a pack horse, Wade showed Hannah how to mount properly, his hands respectfully steadying her as she settled into the saddle. The position felt strange, improper even, but as the mare took a few patient steps under Wade's guidance, Hannah had to admit it was more secure than riding side saddle. "You'll be sore at first," Wade warned, "but your body will adjust to it." As they rode out of Silver Creek, the sun cresting the mountains behind them, Hannah couldn't help glancing back at the town that had briefly been her home. The buildings looked smaller somehow, less substantial in the morning light. "Having second thoughts?" Wade asked, noticing her backward gaze. Hannah turned to face forward, toward the vast expanse of territory that lay ahead. "No," she said with unexpected certainty. "No second thoughts." The first day's journey took them through rolling foothills covered in pine and aspen, the latter blazing gold and orange in their autumn splendor. Wade set a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing stories of his travels. He was careful to keep a respectful distance, stopping frequently to allow Hannah to rest her unaccustomed muscles. By late afternoon, Hannah's thighs and back ached fiercely, but she refused to complain. When they made camp beside a clear stream, she gratefully accepted Wade's help in dismounting, trying not to wince as her feet touched the ground. "You did well today," Wade said, his voice warm with approval. "Many first-time riders would have been asking to stop hours ago." Hannah managed a smile through her discomfort. "My father always said Evans women were made of sterner stuff than most." "He wasn't wrong," Wade replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners. As the days passed, Hannah found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Wade's company. He was unfailingly respectful, turning his back when she needed privacy, sharing his provisions without comment, and keeping conversation light but engaging. In the evenings, as they sat beside the campfire, he told her of his adventures across the frontier, painting vivid pictures of landscapes she'd only read about in books. On the third night, as they camped in a sheltered hollow with a small fire to ward off the autumn chill, Hannah found herself studying Wade as he tended the horses. There was a quiet competence to everything he did, a man completely at ease in the wilderness. "May I ask you something personal?" Hannah ventured when he returned to the fire. Wade settled across from her, the flames illuminating his face. "You can ask, I might not answer." "Why have you never settled in one place? You speak of so many towns, so many jobs." Wade was silent for a long moment, poking at the fire with a stick. "After the war, home didn't feel like home anymore. My parents had passed, farm was sold to pay taxes. Seemed easier to keep moving than to try building something new." He glanced up at her. "What about you? What made a proper Eastern lady decide to come west alone?" Hannah wrapped her arms around her knees. "After my parents died, I was engaged to the son of my father's business partner. It seemed the sensible choice at the time." She stared into the flames. 2 months before the wedding, I discovered him with another woman." When confronted, he said he expected to continue the arrangement after we were married, as many men of his station did. Wade's expression darkened. "Not much of a man, then." "No," Hannah agreed softly. "I broke the engagement, which caused quite the scandal." The teaching position in Silver Creek appeared in a newspaper advertisement the following week. It felt like Providence. Wade added another log to the fire. "Sometimes the hardest paths lead us where we need to go." Hannah nodded, feeling a curious connection to this quiet, thoughtful man. "Have you ever regretted it, the wandering life?" "Sometimes," Wade admitted. "On cold nights when the wind howls through camp, or when I see families gathered for Sunday service in some little town." His eyes met hers across the flames. But then there are moments like this starlight overhead, open country all around that make me think this might be the life I was meant for after all. They fell into a comfortable silence, the crackling of the fire and the soft nickering of the horses the only sounds in the vast wilderness. Hannah found herself wondering what it would be like to share such evenings regularly, to learn all the stories Wade Cooper had to tell. The thought startled her. She'd known the man barely 3 days, yet already she was considering possibilities that would have shocked her proper Ohio upbringing. She quickly attributed it to gratitude and the intimacy forced by their journey. "We should reach Cheyenne by midday tomorrow," Wade said, interrupting her thoughts. "From there, it's another half-day to the Circle M." Hannah nodded, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and disappointment that their journey was nearing its end. "I hope Mr. Marcus finds me suitable for the position." "He will," Wade said with quiet confidence. "Any man would be fortunate to have you teaching his children." The simple compliment warmed her more than the fire before them. "Thank you, Wade, for everything." The following morning brought heavy clouds and a biting wind that promised snow. They rode in companionable silence, both lost in their own thoughts as the terrain gradually flattened into the high plains surrounding Cheyenne. By mid-afternoon, the town appeared on the horizon, a collection of buildings rising from the prairie like a mirage. "We'll stop for supplies," Wade said as they approached, "and you might want to freshen up before we continue to the ranch." The streets of Cheyenne bustled with activity, a stark contrast to the peaceful wilderness they'd traversed. Hannah felt almost overwhelmed by the noise and movement after days of solitude. Wade led them to a modest hotel, securing a room for Hannah while he tended to the horses and gathered supplies. "Take your time," he said, handing her the room key. "I'll meet you in the dining room in 2 hours." Alone in the small but clean room, Hannah unpacked her Sunday dress, the only garment she owned that wasn't travel-worn. After washing away the dust of the trail and arranging her hair in a neat chignon, she studied her reflection in the spotted mirror. 4 days in the open air had brought color to her cheeks and a sparkle to her eyes that had been absent in Silver Creek. When she descended to the dining room, she found Wade already waiting, his own appearance transformed. He'd shaved and changed into clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. He rose as she approached, and for a moment, Hannah saw him not as the trail-worn guide who'd escorted her, but as the handsome, capable man beneath the dust and stubble. "Miss Evans," he said, his voice warm as he held her chair. "You look lovely." Hannah felt a blush rise to her cheeks at the simple compliment. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Cooper." They shared a meal far more substantial than their trail rations, Wade informing her about the Circle M and its owner. Marcus Mitchell inherited the ranch from his father 5 years ago, built it into one of the most prosperous operations in the territory. He's a fair man, treats his hands well. "And his children?" Hannah asked, her thoughts turning to her potential charges. "Good kids. The oldest boy, Thomas, is 12, already taking on ranch responsibilities. Sarah's 9, bright as a new penny. The youngest, James, is 6, still missing his mother something fierce." Hannah nodded, mentally preparing herself for the challenge of 3 children who'd lost a parent. "It's never easy losing a mother so young." "No," Wade agreed softly. "It isn't." Something in his tone made Hannah wonder if he spoke from experience. But before she could ask, he changed the subject, discussing their final leg of travel to the ranch the following morning. They departed Cheyenne at dawn, the promised snow beginning to fall in light, swirling flakes that melted upon touching the ground. The Circle M Ranch appeared by mid-morning, a sprawling operation with a large main house, several outbuildings, and vast pastures dotted with cattle. As they approached, Hannah felt her nervousness returning. This man and his children would determine her fate. If Marcus Mitchell found her unsuitable, she'd be forced to seek other employment in Cheyenne, her funds dangerously depleted. Wade seemed to sense her anxiety. "Remember," he said as they rode through the ranch gate, "you're doing him a favor as much as he's doing you one. Those children need education and a woman's guidance." His words bolstered her confidence as they approached the main house, where a tall man with graying temples stood waiting on the porch. 3 children of varying heights lined up beside him, their faces curious as they watched the approaching riders. Wade Cooper. The man called, stepping down to greet them. "Right on time with those cattle as usual." His gaze shifted to Hannah. "And I see you've brought company." Wade dismounted, then helped Hannah down, his hands lingering at her waist just a moment longer than necessary. "Marcus Mitchell, may I present Miss Hannah Evans. She was the schoolteacher in Silver Creek until recently." Hannah extended her hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Mitchell." Marcus shook her hand firmly. "Likewise, Miss Evans. Wade mentioned in town that you might be interested in a teaching position." "If you're still in need, yes," Hannah replied, straightening her shoulders. "I have excellent references from the school board in Ohio where I taught previously." Marcus gestured to the children. "These would be your pupils, Thomas, Sarah, and James." The children greeted her politely, though the youngest clung to his father's leg, regarding Hannah with solemn eyes. "Perhaps Miss Evans could join us for dinner," Marcus suggested. "We can discuss the particulars of the position, and the children can become acquainted with their potential teacher." "I would be delighted," Hannah said, relief washing through her at the welcome reception. Marcus turned to Wade. "You'll stay too, of course." "I want to hear about those cattle you brought down from Montana." As they moved toward the house, Wade's hand brushed against Hannah's back, a subtle gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by Marcus, whose eyebrows rose slightly before he ushered them inside. The Mitchell home was comfortable and well-appointed, if somewhat lacking the feminine touches that Hannah automatically began to envision adding. The housekeeper, Mrs. Larson, a matronly woman with a no-nonsense manner, served a hearty meal while Marcus questioned Hannah about her teaching experience and approach to education. "And where do you stand on discipline, Miss Evans?" he asked as they finished the main course. Hannah considered her answer carefully. "I believe children respond best to clear expectations and consistent consequences. Physical punishment is rarely necessary if a child understands both why rules exist and what will happen if they're broken." Marcus nodded approvingly. "And your plans?" "Many young teachers move on quickly when they marry." Hannah met his gaze steadily. "I have no immediate plans for marriage, Mr. Mitchell. My focus is on building a stable life and continuing my teaching career." As she spoke, she was acutely aware of Wade sitting quietly beside her, his presence both reassuring and somehow unsettling. In the few days of their journey, something had shifted between them, a connection forming that Hannah hadn't anticipated. After dinner, while Marcus showed Wade the new stables he'd constructed, Mrs. Larson took Hannah on a tour of the house, including the small but pleasant room that would be hers if she accepted the position. "It's been hard on the children, losing their mother," Mrs. Larson confided as they examined the schoolroom Marcus had set up in what was once a parlor. "Especially little James. He needs a gentle hand." "I understand," Hannah said softly. "My own mother passed when I was young." Mrs. Larson nodded approvingly. "The master's offering good wages, room and board plus $20 a month." It was a generous offer, more than Hannah had made in Silver Creek. "Mr. Mitchell seems like a fair employer." "One of the best," Mrs. Larson agreed. "Not like some who think they can treat people however they please because we're far from town." By the time they rejoined the men in the main room, Hannah had made her decision. The position offered stability, purpose, and a chance to make a difference in the lives of 3 children who needed her. When Marcus formally offered her the job, she accepted without hesitation. "Excellent," Marcus said, clearly pleased. "You can start Monday, giving you the weekend to settle in." He turned to Wade. "Cooper, you're welcome to use the bunkhouse for as long as you need before moving on." Wade nodded his thanks, but Hannah noticed a flicker of something regret, perhaps, cross his features. "Appreciate that. I should head out by Tuesday, weather permitting. The realization that Wade would soon continue his journey south struck Hannah with unexpected force. In less than a week, he would be gone, continuing his solitary existence while she remained at the Circle M. The thought left a hollow feeling in her chest that she tried to dismiss as mere gratitude for his assistance. That evening, as Hannah prepared for her first night in her new room, a soft knock at her door revealed young Sarah clutching a book to her chest. "Miss Evans," the girl asked hesitantly. "I was wondering if you might read to me. Mother used to before she got sick." Hannah's heart melted at the simple request. "Of course, Sarah. Come in." As she settled onto the bed beside the child and opened the worn copy of the Swiss Family Robinson, Hannah felt a sense of rightness wash over her. This was what she was meant to do: nurture young minds, provide comfort and stability. Later, after Sarah had returned to her own room, Hannah stood by her window, gazing out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. In the distance, she could make out a solitary figure walking near the corral, Wade's tall form unmistakable even in shadow. Without conscious thought, Hannah found herself wrapping a shawl around her shoulders and slipping quietly downstairs and out onto the porch. The night air was crisp with the promise of winter, stars brilliant in the clear sky above. Wade turned at the sound of her footsteps, his expression softening when he recognized her. "Can't sleep?" Hannah approached, drawing her shawl tighter. "It's strange, being in a proper bed after days on the trail." Wade nodded in understanding. "Takes getting used to, going back and forth between civilization and the wild." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, the vastness of the Wyoming night surrounding them. "Thank you," Hannah said finally, "for bringing me here. I think I might find happiness in this place." Wade's gaze remained on the distant horizon. "Marcus is a good man, he'll treat you fairly." "And the children are delightful," Hannah added. "Sarah already asked me to read to her tonight." Wade smiled at that. "You'll be good for them. They need someone like you." The unspoken question hung between them: "What about you? Who do you need, Wade Cooper? Will you write?" Hannah asked instead, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. "Let me know where your travels take you." Wade looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Would you want that?" "I would," Hannah admitted softly. "Very much." Something shifted in Wade's expression, a decision being made. "Hannah," he began, her given name sounding different in his deep voice, "these past few days." He trailed off, seemingly searching for words, but before he could continue, the sound of the door opening behind them caused them both to turn. Marcus stood framed in the doorway, his expression curious. "Everything all right out here?" he asked, his gaze moving between them. "Just getting some air," Hannah replied quickly. "And thanking Mr. Cooper again for his escort." Marcus nodded slowly. "It's getting cold. Best come inside before you catch a chill, Miss Evans." With a last glance at Wade, Hannah nodded and moved toward the door. "Good night, Mr. Cooper." "Good night, Miss Evans," Wade replied, his voice carrying a weight of things unsaid. The following days passed in a flurry of activity as Hannah settled into her role at the Circle M. The children responded well to her teaching methods, even young James gradually warming to her gentle approach. Mrs. Larson proved an ally in establishing routines, and Marcus was respectful of Hannah's authority with the children. Wade, meanwhile, made himself useful around the ranch, helping with repairs to the bunkhouse roof and assisting the hands with the newly delivered cattle. Hannah saw him primarily at mealtimes, their interactions polite but somehow constrained in the presence of others. On Monday evening, after her first full day of teaching, Hannah found Wade waiting on the porch as she returned from a walk with the children. "How was your first day as teacher of the Circle M Academy?" he asked, a smile playing at his lips. Hannah laughed, sending the children inside to wash up for dinner. "Challenging but rewarding. Thomas has a natural aptitude for mathematics that's quite impressive." Wade nodded. "I thought he might." A moment of awkward silence fell between them before Wade spoke again. I'll be heading out tomorrow morning. Weather looks clear for the journey south. Though she'd known it was coming, the news still struck Hannah with surprising force. So soon. Winter's coming, Wade said simply. Best to reach Texas before the heavy snows. Hannah nodded, trying to mask her disappointment. Of course, will you? That is, do you plan to return this way in the spring? Wade studied her face, something unreadable in his eyes. I hadn't planned that far ahead. Usually I follow the work. I see, Hannah said softly, averting her gaze to the distant mountains. Well, I wish you safe travels, Mr. Cooper. Wade stepped closer, his voice dropping. Hannah, there's something I need to say before I go. The intensity in his tone drew her eyes back to his face. Yes, these past days, traveling with you, getting to know you. Wade hesitated, seeming to struggle with unfamiliar terrain. I've never met anyone quite like you. Your courage, your kindness, your determination, they're rare qualities in this world. Hannah's heart quickened at his words. Wade, I know it's forward of me, he continued, and I've no right to ask, but I'd like your permission to write to you. Not just as a passing acquaintance, but as a man who finds himself thinking of a future that includes more than solitary trails. The confession, delivered in Wade's straightforward manner, left Hannah momentarily speechless. In the short time they'd known each other, he had shown her more consideration and respect than any man of her acquaintance, including her former fiancé. I would like that very much, she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Relief washed over Wade's features, followed by something warmer. I can't offer much, Hannah, not now, but perhaps when I return. The dinner bell interrupted whatever he might have said next, calling them inside where private conversation would be impossible. That night, unable to sleep, Hannah penned a letter she had no intention of delivering immediately. In it, she poured out the confusing tangle of emotions that had developed during their brief acquaintance, the trust, the admiration, and yes, the beginnings of deeper feelings she scarcely dared name. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it Wade's departure. The entire household gathered to see him off, Marcus thanking him for the cattle delivery and extracting a promise to bring more in the spring, the children waving enthusiastically. Hannah stood slightly apart, maintaining proper decorum despite the urge to speak privately with him one last time. As Wade mounted his dappled gray, his saddlebags packed for the journey, he tipped his hat to the assembled group before his gaze settled on Hannah. Miss Evans, he said formally, though his eyes conveyed much more. Safe travels, Mr. Cooper, Hannah replied, forcing a smile. Wade hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. Almost forgot. A small token of appreciation for the company on the trail. Hannah accepted the package, her fingers brushing his. Thank you. With a final nod to Marcus, Wade turned his horse toward the south and rode away, his figure gradually diminishing against the vast Wyoming landscape. Only later, alone in her room, did Hannah unwrap the package to find a small leather-bound journal, its pages blank save for an inscription on the first page in a surprisingly elegant hand. For Hannah, that you might record the story of your new beginning, until our paths cross again. Wade beneath the journal lay a sealed envelope containing a letter that made her heart skip, and her cheeks flush with color. It spoke not of grand passions or flowery sentiments, but of honest admiration, of moments shared beside campfires, of conversations that had revealed kindred spirits despite different paths. And at the end, a promise. I will return in the spring, not just for Marcus's cattle, but to learn if what began between us on the trail might grow into something more enduring than the changing seasons. Winter descended on the Circle M with stunning swiftness, transforming the landscape into a world of white. Hannah threw herself into teaching, establishing a routine that brought structure to the Mitchell children's lives. In the evenings, she often wrote in the journal Wade had given her, recording not just daily events but her deepening connection to this place and its people. Letters arrived sporadically from Wade as he made his way south, each one carefully preserved alongside the journal. He wrote of Texas cattle towns and border settlements, of people met and landscapes crossed, but always circling back to questions about her life at the Circle M, about the children's progress, about whether she was finding contentment in her new home. In her replies, Hannah shared the small triumphs of her days: Thomas mastering a difficult mathematics concept, Sarah writing her first complete story, little James finally calling her Miss Hannah instead of the new lady. She described Christmas at the ranch, the children's delight in the simple gifts she'd helped them create for their father, the community gathering that had made her feel truly accepted for the first time. What she didn't write not yet was how often her thoughts turned to him, how she sometimes found herself scanning the horizon, imagining his return though winter still held the land in its grip. February brought the harshest blizzard in a decade, forcing the ranch inhabitants to huddle together in the main house for 3 days while wind howled around the eaves and snow piled in massive drifts. During those confined days, Hannah's relationship with the Mitchell family deepened further. She taught the children to make paper snowflakes, organized dramatic readings around the fireplace, and even coaxed Marcus into sharing stories of his late wife, Alina, giving the children precious memories they'd begun to lose. "You've brought life back to this house," Marcus told her one evening as they watched the children playing checkers. "I hadn't realized how quiet it had become until you filled it with learning and laughter again." Hannah smiled, touched by the compliment. "They're wonderful children." "You've raised them well through difficult times." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "Wade Cooper saw something special in you from the start, said you had a strength that most wouldn't recognize behind your proper manners." Hannah felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "He's a perceptive man." "That he is," Marcus agreed, "and not one to form attachments easily." He paused meaningfully. "Those letters that come for you, they arrive with remarkable regularity for a man who's supposedly wandering." Hannah smoothed her skirt, unsure how to respond. "Mr. Cooper has been kind enough to keep me informed of his travels." Marcus smiled knowingly but didn't press further. "Spring will be here before we know it. The cattle drive season will begin again." "Yes," Hannah said softly, "I suppose it will." As March yielded to April, the snow gradually retreated, revealing mud and eventually the first tender shoots of green. Hannah found herself watching the southern road with increasing frequency, though she knew it was still early for cattle drives to begin moving north. The children noticed her distraction. "Are you waiting for someone, Miss Hannah?" Sarah asked one afternoon as they gathered wildflowers near the creek. "What makes you ask that?" Hannah replied, trying to sound casual. "You keep looking down the road," Sarah said with the direct honesty of childhood, "and you smile different when you get those letters." Hannah gently tucked a wildflower behind Sarah's ear. "Sometimes grown-ups have friends who live far away. It's natural to miss them and look forward to seeing them again." "Is Mr. Cooper your special friend?" Sarah persisted. "Papa says he's coming back soon to bring more cattle." Hannah's heart quickened at the news. "Your father mentioned that?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "He got a telegram yesterday. Mr. Cooper will be here next week. Papa said we should prepare the south pasture." The news left Hannah both elated and suddenly nervous. After months of correspondence, would their in-person reunion live up to the connection they'd developed through letters? Would the feelings that had grown in absence withstand the reality of presence? The answer came sooner than expected. 3 days later, as Hannah was conducting afternoon lessons in the schoolroom, the sound of approaching horses drew the children's attention to the windows. "Riders coming," Thomas announced, abandoning his arithmetic. Hannah moved to the window, her breath catching as she recognized the figure at the head of the small procession, Wade Cooper, sitting tall on his dappled gray, looking much the same as when he'd left, perhaps a bit more tanned from the Texas sun. "Children, please complete your sums while I greet our visitors," Hannah said, striving for a composure she didn't feel as she straightened her hair and smoothed her dress. By the time she reached the front porch, Marcus was already greeting Wade and the three hands who accompanied him. Wade dismounted, clasping Marcus's extended hand before his gaze found Hannah, standing somewhat uncertainly in the doorway. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the yard, months of letters and unspoken thoughts hanging in the space between them. "Miss Evans," Wade said finally, removing his hat, "you're looking well." "As are you, Mr. Cooper," Hannah replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Welcome back to Circle M." Before either could say more, the children burst from the house, surrounding Wade with excited greetings and questions about his travels. He answered them patiently, though his eyes frequently returned to Hannah, who remained on the porch, emotions warring within her. That evening, after a celebratory dinner to welcome Wade and his men, Hannah finally found herself alone with him on the very porch where they'd parted months before. The spring night was cool but pleasant, stars emerging in the darkening sky. "Your letters," Wade began without preamble, "they've been a companion on many lonely trails." Hannah smiled, her initial nervousness fading in his familiar presence. "As yours have been to me. The children think I'm quite the correspondent now." Wade moved closer, his expression growing serious. "Hannah, when I left last fall, I wasn't sure what I was feeling. I just knew I'd never met anyone who affected me the way you did." "And now?" Hannah asked softly. "Now I'm certain," Wade said simply. "These months apart, writing to you, thinking about you, they've only confirmed what I began to suspect on our journey here." He took a deep breath. "I love you, Hannah Evans. I think perhaps I have since that night in Silver Creek when you accepted half a loaf of bread from a stranger and showed more courage than most men I've known." The declaration, though hinted at in his recent letters, still took Hannah's breath away. "Wade, I know I have little to offer," he continued quickly. "No settled home, no fortune, just my name and whatever future we might build together." Hannah reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "You offered me bread when I was hungry, protection when I was vulnerable, and respect when others showed none. You saw value in me when a whole town was willing to cast me aside." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Those things are worth more than any fortune." Hope dawned in Wade's eyes. "Does that mean?" "It means I love you too," Hannah said, the words both terrifying and liberating. "I've spent months trying to convince myself it was gratitude or admiration, but it's more than that, so much more." Wade's hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "I've thought of this moment every day since I rode away." "As have I," Hannah confessed. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips beneath the vast Wyoming sky. When they parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers, his voice a low rumble between them. "I've been saving, Hannah. Every job, every cattle drive, I've put money aside for land of my own." He drew back slightly to meet her eyes. "I thought maybe if you felt the same way we might find a place not too far from here, somewhere to build a home." Hannah smiled, joy bubbling up within her. "I think that sounds wonderful." "Marcus has offered me work managing the north section of his range," Wade continued. "Said it would give us a start while we look for our own place." The thought of remaining near the Mitchell family, watching the children continue to grow, filled Hannah with additional happiness. "They've become like family to me." "I know," Wade said, smiling. "Your letters made that clear." "They're lucky to have found you." "As I'm lucky to have found you," Hannah replied, her hand finding his, "even if it took being cast aside for us to meet." 3 weeks later, Hannah Evans became Hannah Cooper in a simple ceremony at the Circle M, with Marcus standing as Wade's best man and the Mitchell children proudly participating. Mrs. Larson outdid herself with a feast that rivaled any harvest celebration, and ranchers from miles around gathered to wish the couple well. As evening fell, Wade led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, the strains of a fiddle filling the spring air. "Happy?" he asked softly. Hannah gazed up at the man who had offered her bread and eventually his heart. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. Later, as they prepared to depart for the small cabin on the North Range that would be their temporary home, Marcus presented them with a deed. "Wedding present," he explained. 100 acres adjoining my north boundary, good water, decent grazing." Wade stared at the document in disbelief. "Marcus, we can't accept this." "You can and you will," Marcus insisted. "Consider it payment for bringing Hannah into our lives. The children need her, and I need a good foreman I can trust." He clapped Wade on the shoulder. "Besides, good neighbors are hard to come by in these parts." As they rode toward their future that night, the stars illuminating their path, Hannah reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. From the humiliation in Silver Creek to finding love and purpose on the Wyoming frontier, each step had led her exactly where she needed to be. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, his arms secure around her waist as they rode together on his dappled gray. Hannah smiled, leaning into his embrace. "That sometimes being cast aside is the beginning of being found." Wade pressed a kiss to her temple. "And sometimes sharing bread leads to sharing a life." "A very good trade," Hannah agreed as they continued toward home, the promise of their future stretching before them like the endless Wyoming sky.